Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our first in-person SEPTA meeting since COVID. Um, we'd like to thank everyone here. It is on YouTube. So the microphone right now is sort of a prop in my hand. You can hear me fine. But right now, thanks to the partnership of Mr. Eddie Castro and Mrs. Vicky Visecchia, we are also on YouTube. So we have people at home, so thank you to those of you who've signed in. I'm Sid Vincitori, co-president of SEPTA. Sandra Rubin is the other co-president. She couldn't be here tonight because of a family obligation. And I have two other members of the executive board.
I'm Maria Murphy, the secretary this year.
And hi, I'm Gina Egan. I'm also a secretary, I'm corresponding secretary, so all the emails you've been getting, that's usually me sending them. If you have any questions, you can reach all of us at nrseptapresidents@gmail.com. That's how you can reach us. Please feel free to send us emails if you have any questions. Maria is a former past president of SEPTA. I am a former past president of SEPTA. We kind of keep it here, and we always like to welcome new people to come in, so anyone is welcome. We really would love to have some new families join us and help us on this journey. We've had many years walking this journey, and we'd like to share, so please join us.
And we'd like to thank Michelle and Dr. Palmer for being here today, the directors of special ed for New Rochelle. And we really appreciate the support. They actually both live pretty far from here, so we really appreciate that they came to join us. And I'm sure they're happy to take any questions afterwards, too. Oh, and Silvana is here, our interpreter. And I don't know how we're going to set that up. I'll let you guys.
So yes, if anyone needs Spanish translation tonight, Silvana is here. Silvana, how do you want to work that?
I could speak out loud to everyone, or I could be sitting directly with her, or if there's anybody else I need to, we can put a form of group and sit in the back, or right next to her, I'll speak slowly.
Okay. Okay, that sounds good. Does that work for you, Silvana? That works? Okay. Dorothy, you're okay with that? Okay. So what we do want to share with everybody is tonight we do have a guest joining us. Her name is Dr. Dorothy Leone. And just a reminder that, Dorothy is here to present a workshop. And it is a workshop that's being brought to us by the New Rochelle Special Education PTA. And so she's here to share some strategies and teach us some probably fascinating things. I always learn fascinating things from her. But we just want to make sure that you know that it's not a city school district workshop or presentation. It is a PTA presentation. There will be an opportunity to ask some questions at the end. Of course, if we run out of time, you can always email us, nrseptapresidents@gmail.com. And for those of you who are watching at home, if you have any questions, you can also please email us. We'll get those questions to Dr. Leone and then get the responses back to you as quickly as possible.
I think you should write down somewhere where the email address is.
Okay. You got it. I will give it to you. We have it in Spanish for you, Silvana, so we'll get that to you. So I'm going to turn it over to Dorothy and let her introduce herself. And I hope you enjoyed the workshop, and thank you for being with us. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dorothy Leone. I feel really honored to be here. I hear that this is the first time that you guys are getting together in person since COVID. So I mean, I don't know. I feel like I should have like a band behind me or something. First off, I wanted to share that this, I'm hoping, is a conversation. I do have some things I'd love to share with all of you, but I would love to hear from you too. So if the content of this is not meeting your learning needs right in the moment, jump in with me, right? This is part of the learning process. So I welcome you to do that as we're engaging this evening, okay? So you see that title behind me. It says Unlocking Potential. And I have a 10-year-old daughter who is very into Harry Potter right now. So I don't know if anybody else is a Harry Potter fan. I'm trying to become one. I'm not really yet, but we'll see. And she told me that this saying here is on top of the keys in the Harry Potter series. And it literally means unlocking. And when I told her the topic of our conversation tonight, she said, I think I can connect this to this book. I was really proud that she was making some sort of text comparison. So I was like, okay, hence my picture behind me. I did want to take a few moments, though, just to introduce myself so that you can feel grounded in the work we're about to do. Then I'm going to ask you to chat with one another for just a few moments so that you can feel grounded with one another in the room. And then we'll get to some good stuff. Let's see if my little clicker works here. Okay. So first off, I started my journey a long time ago. I went to Teachers College, I don't know, a million years ago now it feels like, and I studied speech-language pathology while I was there. I liked the field of speech pathology, but I liked the field of understanding autism spectrum disorder even more. So I hung out there for a long time and decided to do my doctorate. Sure. No problem. Thank you so much for sharing that. So I decided to stay there for a bit of time and specifically focus on what I'm going to talk about as a neurodivergent learner. So when I was doing my doctorate, that word wasn't so popular. And we talked much more about individuals with autism spectrum disorder. But now we talk about the neurodivergent learner. We have an understanding that everyone's brain works differently. And we have a certain amount of respect for that difference. I say a certain amount because we still have light years to go, but we'll talk about that as we go. I also spent a lot of my career working in the City Department of Ed. I worked for a program called the ASD Nest program, which is a program for children with autism. I also currently function as a professor at Iona University, right down the hall from you guys, although my office just moved. So now we're over in Bronxville, our School of Health Science. No more New Rochelle for me. At Iona, I run the Communication Sciences and Disorders department, and I specifically enjoy engaging in research with neurodivergent learners. I spend most of my day with folks on the neurodiversity spectrum. And then lastly, maybe not lastly, I'm a mom. I have 3 children of my own, 10, 7, and 3. They keep me very busy, but they offer perspective to my work constantly. And so you might hear little stories here and there about them as we engage in our journey tonight. Okay, here we go, my first weird slide. A lot of weird slides in the slide deck, I promise. The first thing I want everyone to do is engage in a game called Zombie Cats. You might be saying to me, Dorothy, it's 7:45 at night. I don't want to play any games. I've already put in a 12-hour workday. I'm telling you, it's worth it. What I'm going to ask you to do is partner with somebody who's sitting very close to you. So I'm sorry, my 2 friends in the front, I'm going to ask that one of you has to get up and get some steps in. Sorry about that. But I think everybody else has somebody who's sitting relatively close, okay? And what you're going to do for this game, Zombie Cats, okay, is you're going to try to come up with a name, a 2-word name for your group. And the way you come up with the 2-word name for your group is because both people have to have some sort of liking or engagement with that word. So when I played this game a long time ago with someone, we both decided that we did not like zombies, but we both did like cats. So we decided to call ourselves the Zombie Cats, hence the name of this game. So we're going to just take maybe 3 minutes just to feel a little grounded with somebody in the room, okay? It's important, I think, to engage in this because we haven't really spent so much time shoulder to shoulder over the past few years. And I'll talk about how this time connecting is actually very much related to the work we do in the field of special education. So we'll pause here for a moment, and I'll give you about 3 to 4 minutes to have this conversation with one another. You're looking for a 2-name title or team name of some sort, and I'm going to ask that you don't have to share it after the 3 or 4 minutes, but you are certainly welcome to share it after the 3 or 4 minutes. Any questions? Sid? So Sid's question is it one thing we have in common that we both like? It could be something you like, something you don't like, something common, something uncommon, but it has to name you in a certain way. Okay? Oh, look, they're joining. They're making a threesome. I love it. All right, if you want to change your seat, you're more than welcome to. All right, our time is going to start. And my question is not what your team name is. My question is, how do you feel? After that activity, how do you feel? Do you feel the same as when I started speaking? Or do you feel different after that activity? You feel different.
Yes, I do.
How do you feel different?
A bit lighter, a bit more involved.
Lighter and involved. Anybody else? How do you feel? Awake. Oh, gosh, come on. I teach college freshmen. No, just kidding. How do you feel? Connected. Love these words. Love them. So guess what? This is how our children feel. When we ask them to make these connections in a non-threatening way, meaning there's no test score associated with it, there's no rubric for scoring it, but we're asking them to connect and engage with others in the classroom, in the therapy room, at home, sometimes that's exactly how they feel. Now, my research says, though, that that's not always how individuals feel. Sometimes, as a neurodivergent learner, there's pressure and stress associated with social experiences. So you have to create a balance here. You have to know your learner. Is your learner someone who's going to view this activity as exciting and fun? Or is your learner going to view this activity as someone who's stressed and anxious? So, if you identify as a pretty neurotypical adult in the room, you might have felt connected and excited, but you want to be mindful of who your audience is when you put this kind of demand, right, that was pretty lighthearted, right, on your child or your student, because I recognize we have parents as well as staff members in the room. So something to think about. The other thing I want to talk about is, what was your name? What did you come up with as your name? Anybody something good? I heard some good ones, and I was very impressed with how quickly the names came.
I want to speak on behalf of this group here that I'm translating for them. They quickly connected with 21, the chromosome, and it was a learning experience for me because they explained to me that that's the chromosome for the Down syndrome. So they call themselves the SWAT 21, and they immediately connected.
So just so everyone at home can hear as well, the Squad 21 to make a connection with that. And that's the chromosome that we link to Down syndrome. So that was really interesting. What a meaningful name. Oh gosh, that just gave me like a little chill down there. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. Do we have one more team that wants to share perhaps? Oh, we have our team in the front who wants to share.
Tomato sauce.
Tomato sauce. Oh my. Okay, we're going to have to take it offline and we'll have to hear a little bit about that one. I love it though. So again, connection, building rapport, creating some sort of engagement or shared experience are themes that we'll talk about this evening. So thanks for engaging in my very silly zombie cats, but I hope you remember something from it. Okay, so this evening, when I was thinking about what might this group want to engage in conversation and discussion about, I was thinking about three major themes. The first being behavior, the second being visual, and the third being sensory. And my hope is that we'll take about 10 minutes for each topic and explore them and perhaps add some tools to that ever-growing toolbox that each of you have, and maybe even engage in a deeper thinking process for each of these categories. So we'll see how far we get. Okay, so let's think about behavior here. We have our traditional iceberg picture. I'm sure many of you have seen this picture before, but if you haven't, I'll walk you through it very quickly. When we think about behavior, what we see on the surface, the top of that iceberg, is so small in comparison to what is under the water. There are so many times I go into a school and the child is on the floor and the team turns to me and says, "What do we do?" And I say to them, "I don't know. I have no idea what is under the iceberg for this child." And until we really figure out what's under the iceberg, we can't really intervene. So I'll explain a little bit more what I mean here. When we think about, oops, give me one sec. Okay. When we think about behavior, my hope is that we think about the proactive piece rather than the reactive piece. So when we're thinking about behavior, we have to think about what happened right before the behavior, or what happened an hour before the behavior. So I'll give you an example. I was in a school in the Bronx yesterday, and child was having a really, really tough time. Behaviors were pretty big and pretty violent. And the school kept saying to me, "I just don't know why this child is doing this." And I said, "Well, what have we done to help set this child up?" Because the school at that point was looking to be very reactive. Here's the child is engaged in the behavior, what do we do? And my answer, they didn't like this by the way, was nothing. There's really nothing other than keep the child safe that you can do in that moment. But there is so much you can do before that moment hits. And that's where the real conversation comes in. Just to give you a little bit of case study here, this particular child was bused to school, and the bus ride for this particular child was 58 minutes that morning. Child is in kindergarten, okay? There's so many things wrong with that, but that's a whole different story, right? But that was, so the child walked in and threw herself on the ground. Guess what? I'd throw myself on the ground too if I was on a bus for an hour with no means of communication and nothing else to do other than look out the window, right? So now, I'm not in the business of busing, by the way, right? I do not control the bus. However, I can certainly control what happens when that child gets off the bus into my school. She can't be greeted with, "Hi, come on in, let's do foundations." No way. She needs to be greeted with, "Do you need to eat something? Do you need to go to the bathroom? Do you need a few minutes to relax?" I'll give you another example. How many of you have traveled in traffic before? Ugh, I know. I'm a school-based consultant, right? So I go school to school, some that are not very close by. So when I get somewhere after that 2-hour drive of anxiety of being late to your place, hunger, having to use the restroom, I'm not really in a good mood. But I identify as a neurotypical adult, so I have some self-regulation ability. I also have control. As an adult, we have more control over our life decisions, if you will, than a child. A child in a school has to ask to use the restroom. Why? Because we need to make sure we know where that child is. As an adult, we might have to wait as a teacher, right? You get very good at that as a teacher. But you have more control over it. So, what I ask you to think about when you're thinking about a child who's engaged in a behavior is not, what can I do during that behavior? The question is, what can I do before that behavior? By the way, that answer will be different for each and every child. And maybe Scenario A is you do this for that one child, but scenario B is you do something else for that same child. So even if you have the same child, your proactive strategies might be different based on context. Another really key consideration here. Context. Did they sleep the night before? Did they have enough water? Did they eat their breakfast? Did the school lunch come out burnt and therefore they didn't eat lunch? Context is really important for us to know how to engage proactively. Many schools I work in, they want the list. Dorothy, give me the list. Give me the 5 things I should do to prevent this behavior. It don't work like that, right? If I had that list, I'd be very wealthy, I think, but I don't have it. The list is really student dependent and context dependent. So you always have to think about that big picture for the student, whether that big picture is at home when you're about to engage in homework with your child, whether that big picture is about that you're trying to get in the car on the way to your cousin's house and you're already running late, right? You have to think about all of those pieces there. Okay, I think we're okay here. Another piece I wanted to bring up, and I hinted at this a little bit, this is like Psychology 101, right? Good old Maslow. Maybe you remember him, maybe you don't. Maslow's hierarchy, where we learned about all of the needs we have as human beings. And these needs have to be met on a regular basis in order for us to feel regulated. I'll take you through something. I'm sure all of you have had a night where you did not sleep well. That night could be followed by a very hectic morning. That morning is then followed by you feel like you are a tornado coming into your place of employment or your first stop, whatever that stop is. What do? Well, those are days that I treat myself to Dunkin' Donuts and I stop at Dunkin' Donuts on the way to work. Those are days I wear my really comfortable shoes. I wear those pants that are kind of like sweatpants that shouldn't be worn to work, but I still wear them, right? Why? Because I'm taking care of those needs. Our kids sometimes don't get to make those choices. Sometimes we're pushing them out the door. Let's get to soccer practice. Let's get to occupational therapy. We have dinner at grandma's house. Even though some of these needs were not met. And children are interesting. When people study the neurology of the child mind, very frequently children are not great at exercising the communication of exactly what they need. They communicate things like no and maybe tantrum, or they communicate something like I'm not doing that, but they don't always tell us the rationale. I often say with so many of the children I work with and spend time with, I wish I could just open up their brain, right? And see what kind of engine is running in there. What's their computer system like in there? That would help me a lot. But it doesn't work like that. So we want to be mindful of how we're meeting the needs of our particular child we're working with, living with, whatever our scenario is. Okay. So what do we know? What did we just talk about for the past 10 minutes when we talk about behavior? Let's go through it nice and slow. First thing, we know the root or the cause of the behavior is important, and sometimes we don't know what it is, right? We know that proactive work is key. Things like setting clear expectations, relying on routines are going to be so imperative for us. Now, granted, we got to be careful about that relying on routines piece. I don't know if anybody has a child who enjoys routines, but sometimes when that routine is broken, that can result in a behavioral manifestation. So you want to be mindful of that you want to be routinized enough to decrease anxiety, but you have to have some level of spontaneity tossed in there because life has spontaneity. Sometimes when you open the Pop-Tart is broken. And guess what? I have a kiddo, doesn't like when the Pop-Tart is broken. And that really messes with his routine. It's important to kind of celebrate some of those changes and highlight them as things that we can maybe work through. Maybe we can't, by the way, and that's okay too. So just a little tidbit there. Okay, so we want to reflect on student needs, thinking about building relationships, providing choice, and increasing motivation and engagement. So when we think about Maslow, we want to think about all of those needs, but we also want to think about that piece of the zombie cats game. How did you feel? You felt connected, you felt engaged. All of those things are also equally important. And then I write, be positive, and then be more positive. Oh, gosh, patience is hard. There's so many times when someone will say, I don't know what to say after that. He just destroyed my living room. I was working with a family the other day where the child threw a wine glass across the room. Lots of glass all over, someone was injured, right? It was pretty big stuff happening. And the parent said to me, I don't know what to do in reaction to that. And my answer to the parent was, can you find something positive that occurred? And the parent looked at me like, oh, Dorothy, no, I can't, right? But we do have to find those moments of positivity, even in the storm, if you will. Sometimes those are really hard to find. Now, granted, sometimes actions do have consequences, right? Like you made a mess, we're gonna try and clean it up. We're gonna try and clean it up together. But we don't have to be punitive about that consequence, right? So there's a real difference there. And we wanna think through that. So that's a bigger conversation, but I'm just gonna throw it out there. Think about that, channeling that positivity, if you will. Okay, we're going back to our main slide here. Remember, there were 3 themes we were trying to talk about. Behavior was one of them. We just gave about 10 minutes or so. We could pause if anybody has any questions about the material we just covered, or comments. Maybe you're thinking about your own child. Maybe you're thinking about your own classroom and you're connecting to some of this. Happy to pause and take that right now, or we can move on. Anybody? Okay, let's get you on mic here. Hold on.
What's the positive in the wine glass example?
Oh, it's a good one, right? So I said to the parent, well, what was happening right before the wine glass? And the truth was, they were having a really beautiful dinner. So I said, let's talk about the dinner then. And that's what we did, right? So we highlighted that because there is really nothing about the actual throwing of the glass and breaking and shattering, right? But the conversation the child was giving right beforehand was beautiful. The issue was the conversation took a turn that the child didn't like, and that was the gut reaction for the child. Other questions or comments? I'm coming over. I'm getting my steps in here, by the way. This is great. Okay, tell me your question.
What options does she has when her child is nonverbal? So she's only guessing what he needs.
So nonverbal child, communication is so important. Perfect. Okay, great. My recommendation is to think through what kind of communication system can we offer the child? Is it a picture? Is it a device? Is it anything that you can get to learn what that child's wants and needs are? So that's one thing. And then the second thing is the body tells you a lot. So non-verbally, the child tells you things. And we have to start to really look at that body and figure out what clues the body is giving us. Other questions? Okay, I'm coming over. Get my steps in. Here we go. Okay, tell me your question.
Just to piggyback off of the question here, my daughter, she's 5, she's nonverbal, and it can be a challenge. But one thing we've learned, she doesn't have a device yet. She's being evaluated for some sort of device. We try to pay attention to the environment because people often ask us that $1 million question. She's nonverbal, and you guys don't do sign language. How do you know what she wants? And she's actually taught us, we allowed ourselves to be teachable. And so wherever we're at, we consider that and say, it's going to be something in the air. Like, she doesn't point, so she'll grab us and bring us to the kitchen, and she'll put our hand up. And if it's over the refrigerator, she usually wants dry cereal. She goes like this. In the other cabinet, she usually wants like her raisins or crackers or something. But she typically uses the environment to communicate, and it's a challenge, but it's helpful for us when we allow ourselves to be taught. Again, about the bus ride, it's funny because sometimes our daughter won't eat breakfast, and she wants to eat her Cheerios on the bus, dry cereal. You can't do that. Today was one of those days, but she gets ticked off, so the bus driver said, Rochelle, she can't have that. And my wife said, understood, but it's going to be a big problem if you take it from her. She hasn't eaten breakfast yet and things like that, but we understand if you have to take it, but just know, so, I didn't hear anything from the school about her arriving at school upset. I kind of called the school, text the teacher ahead of time and said that she arrives upset. It can be because the cereal was taken and she's hungry. So, it's a challenge, but, that's what we try to do.
Pretty amazing. You want to talk about proactive here? Okay, time out. We're gonna translate. Yeah, because that's a really nice connection for this parent here. We'll just pause for a second. Thank you. I'm just gonna let her, yeah. Okay, sure. So for those of you joining from home, we did have some paused moments. So if you see a paused moment, it just means that we took a small break and that we're coming back. So we're trying to engage in this hybrid learning model here. No worries. Okay, so I did want to connect with what was just shared, and then I see your hand up. Thank you. So one thing I wanted to just mention was that was a great example of proactivity there, right? This gentleman in the front said he called the school district to alert the district or the school, to alert the school that the child may be a little upset when she arrives at the building because of what occurred with the Cheerios not being permitted on the bus. That's a gift. I mean, I wish every parent would do that, right? So it's just such a great example there. The other thing I wanted to just highlight from what was shared was talking about the use of the environment for a nonverbal child. Such an important piece. When an individual cannot communicate orally, we have to take any communication their body gives us. And it's very frustrating for the individual who does not have verbal output to not be listened to non-verbally. So that pulling of the arm, it's so easy to just say, oh, wait a minute. That minute is not okay for that child because that's the only way that child can communicate in that moment. Okay. We're okay. Okay, great. I think we have another question over here. I'm going to just ask you to hold the mic. I apologize.
No, that's okay. I wasn't here for the experiment that you did, but I came in at a point where you were talking about something that kind of triggered me, and I thought, oh, I really want to figure out how to do that. My son is 5 years old. He has autism, and he's verbal, but his language is still emerging, so he's able to communicate his wants and needs very easily, which is a blessing. And he's in an integrated classroom setting at Barnard. And, you know, I've spent a lot of time with my son just helping him prepare him for kindergarten. And he did an extra year of pre-K4. He's a late December baby. Just so that we could get ahead of the behaviors, because I felt like, okay, he needs to have as much of the curriculum component under his belt so that the behaviors don't interfere with that. Like, I don't want them to say, he can't write and he's not listening. He doesn't know his numbers and he's not able to sit still. He doesn't, you know, so I'm like, okay, we're going to get all of that taken care of. You're going to know your numbers, you're going to know your letters, you're going to know all this stuff. I just don't I don't know how do I not bring my anxiety to him when, you know, I'm trying to keep him up to speed. Yeah. I don't want to cry because I feel like I'm always crying.
It's okay to cry.
But I just want to help him. And I think, no, it's okay, I'm okay. Thank you. I'm okay. So the question is, you know, he has a full day of school. So before, I was like waking up, we wake up early. He has a sister who's neurotypical, and wake up early, and I would do work with him before he went to school. And then he'd get to school, and then he has ABA therapy after school, so he's in school from like 8 to 3 o'clock, and then from 3:30 to 5:30, he's at ABA. Then he comes home, and by the time that time, it's 6 o'clock, and he has like 3 pages of homework to do. So I'm like, you know, I try to like figure out, like they said, don't work with him in the morning, because that kind of stresses him out. So I'm like, okay, so we stop working with him in the morning. We just watch little videos. Him and his sister will, you know, the ABC videos, counting videos, those type of things in the morning, because they enjoy them. And then after school, they started doing some ABA homework, doing homework with him at the ABA. So that kind of relieved me. So I'm like, okay, so good. They're going to work with him at the center on his homework. So then when he comes home, he has time to be himself and just be who he is. You know what I mean? Like, without me telling him, don't do this, don't do that, blah, 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 don't do the sounds, don't jump, blah, blah. You know, like, just let him be, you know, because everybody needs time to be themselves, you know? So when he gets home in the evening, it's like now he has the homework, and I'm just like, okay, we have to get to bed. You have to get 10 hours of sleep. You need to go, you know, I'm just like, how do I not enter into the homework process at 6:30 in the evening, not stressed out? And like, he's looking at me tired, and I'm like, come on, what does this word say? AT, like, you know, like, ooh. I just, do I need to meditate before we sit down at the table? You know what I mean? Like, what do I need to do to prepare myself so that I'm not making him take on my energy? Because I do feel like he kind of like looks at me like, you're kind of wound up. You know what I mean? Yeah. Okay, sorry.
Don't be sorry. That was amazing. Okay, first off, we have to just talk that you are an amazing parent, okay? What you just listed as your typical day is amazing. And you got to give yourself a pat on the back sometimes, too. We don't do that, by the way. We never do that. We never say, I'm doing a really good job. What do? We get nervous about our shortcomings. He didn't sleep 10 hours. He only slept 9.5 hours. He's going to have a bad day the next day because he only slept that. So celebrate all that you do. It's a blessing that he's with you. That's first there.
Actually, I'm very honored to be translating for this young lady here because she's very wise. What she was saying is, in dealing with your frustration and your anxiety,
I think we should get the mic here.
society is not open to
Oh, music to my ears.
receive those kind of special children, right? That we have so much expectations, and instead of them adapting to us, we need to adapt to them. And the society's demands are too high. And if he can't do it, that pressure is too much for them. So they just let it go. And that's what she was saying. So to me, that's really wise.
Okay, you're going to lead the workshop now because I'm ready. I'm going to go. I- it's amazing. I agree 100%. Just the fact that all of you are still sitting amazes me because most likely you all are checking out. You've been sitting for 45 minutes. It's late. You've put in hours upon hours of your day. So society says somebody's speaking, you got to stay seated. Oh, gosh, that's horrible. Somebody says somebody's speaking, you have to be quiet. Horrible. What I mean by horrible is everyone's brain in this room is working at a different pace. This amazing mom over here, her son's brain is working also at a different pace. So why is it that we have to, say that he has to sit on the rug or that he has to listen in that moment? Sorry, teachers who are here. Or why do we say that he has to do something in a particular way if that doesn't allow his body to regulate? Eek. We're not there yet as a society, by the way. When I teach my graduate courses, by the way, I tell students, you got to stand. We're together 2.5 hours, 3 hours sometimes. No, we got to move. We got to go. It's the only way we're going to work this here. And that's, by the way, just my best guess. They might need other things. Remember Maslow's hierarchy? They might need water. They might need dinner. I mean, listen, I can't make dinner for everybody. I'm a pretty good cook, but I'm not making it for the whole class, right? So think about all of those things, right? I'm laughing because we have a little guy in the back of the room here who is just like stealing the show back there, by the way. He's so adorable. And he's doing exactly what his body needs, right? He's walking around, he's vocalizing, right? And all of that needs to be accepted. And not just accepted, by the way, in my opinion, very humble opinion, but celebrated. Ah, love it. Okay, I'm really leaving now, okay? Respected, right? Because we show respect for so many other groups in so many other different ways. Why can't we do it for this group whom we're speaking about this evening? I want to get back, though, to the conversation we were having from this question about the parental stress and anxiety. First, I want to just say, I think that as a parent, we all go through highs and lows of stress and anxiety. Some of us are lean towards the higher level, and some of us not so much. When I think about parents whom I work with, I often think about a parent who needs, and pardon me for being so blunt, self-care. A parent who needs to take care of themselves just as much as they need to take care of their child. So you always want to be thinking that. My students know this about me, but I'll share this with all of you. I get up very early every morning. So I'm up at 4:30 every morning. Some of you maybe are not, maybe you're also early birds, and I go to the gym every morning. I know my husband is always like, why do you do that, Dorothy? Like, what is wrong with you? And for me, that's the moment I can slip in self-care. And it's really important for my body to feel regulated. I also, though, am a person who needs sleep to regulate. So, by the way, tonight is totally messing me up, right? Because by the time I get to bed, no, I'm just kidding. But I also need to be mindful of that if I cut my sleep by a little bit, I need to pick it up at some point. Not everybody is like that, by the way, right? Like some people can sleep for 5 hours and they're good to go. I'm not like that. So when you think about your own stress and anxiety cycle, you need to think about your own self-regulation process, I think, and your own ability to self-care. It's interesting, at Iona, I work with an interprofessional group, and one of the pillars of what we teach our graduate students about interprofessional behavior is this concept of self-care and how the health professional really needs to think through, how am I taking care of myself? So it's just something to think about. By the way, there's a researcher, not that it matters, her name is Brenda Smith-Miles, and she talks about, remember that behavior curve we saw a couple of slides ago? Where'd it go? Let's get back to it. Here we go. So if you notice here on the bottom of it, you might not be able to read it, but it says adult curve. So when children or anyone, I work with adults who also engage in behaviors, are engaging in a behavior, the adult, the partner, the communication partner, the significant other, also goes through a little bit of a behavior curve. For all the teachers or educators or therapists in the room, you possibly have all felt this in your classroom. You feel something rumbling in the classroom, you almost feel your stomach starting to rumble. I once had a parent tell me at a school I was working at, she's an amazing, amazing parent, just like all of you are in this room, and she said to me, I have so much anxiety going to McDonald's, Dorothy, that I just think I can't go anymore. I was like, what do you mean? And the menu board was a trigger for her child who was in middle school because there was a decision process that had to go through about what he wanted to eat. And it 85% of the time landed in him throwing himself on the floor at McDonald's, and he's a middle school boy. There's a stigma attached to that, right? Talk about society not being ready. And as a result, this parent felt that stress and anxiety. That stress and anxiety is not going to go away, right? It's going to be present. But how we manifest it and how we break out of it for a moment and take a pause, I think is important. So talking about, like the homework routine of like it being 7 o'clock at night and having 3 pages of homework to do, for example, and feeling this stress of like, oh gosh, this teacher wants this homework tomorrow. I often ask parents, is the child learning in that moment? Most of the time, the answer is no. And what do I say? Put a sticky note on the homework and tell the teacher, couldn't complete. We'll try to get to it a different day. You're not going to fail kindergarten because you didn't do that homework page. I work sometimes with individuals who have ADHD, and when they're younger, very frequently, well, when they're older, sometimes they go on medication, and that quells some of the symptoms, sometimes not, but sometimes it does, of ADHD. But the younger children are not, very frequently not candidates for some sort of pharmacology treatment plan. And what happens is the child presents very differently as a younger child than as an older child. And I often say to parents, one day, most likely, he's going to be able to complete this homework. But right now, no homework. Teachers want to meet you halfway. They want to hear about that struggle of what's going on at home. When I was working full-time in a school and I offered some sort of carryover assignment, I wanted to know how it was going. And there should not be punitive action based on if you can't complete it, right? So it's just something to think through. Right? You are the voice for your child. But not only that, right? That's about self-advocacy. That's a whole nother topic, by the way, right? But what I really mean is there learning happening? So when you're doing that homework at 6:30 at night, is the child engaged with you? Maybe they are. Maybe they're engaged with you for the first 2 math problems. Great, celebrate that. But then maybe don't do the second 2 math problems. Or maybe on Monday, because they didn't sleep so well Sunday night, you do you do half of the math problems. But then on Tuesday, because they had a really solid night's sleep, you do all the math problems. So you kind of get the context there. All right, I want to be mindful of the time. It is 8:26, so we'll go for a few more minutes. I want to see if there are questions, though, because I think that's a really important piece of our conversation. Okay, go ahead. Sure, go for it.
I wanted to just validate the whole proactive thing. So, I'm sorry. So I just wanted to validate the proactive thing. So my son was in a setting 2 years ago that was not right for him. And it was all reactive. And he was just in a bad place, temper tantrums, and he was in middle school, so it was a very bad situation. But once he was not in that situation anymore, and the setting that he was in was all proactive. It was what's going to happen if we do this? How is it? It was all, and I couldn't ever really put it into words the way you just did. But people would be like, oh my God, he's so different now. He's so, like, what happened? Nothing happened. We just all we were all worried about the things after he did it instead of thinking about things that we could do to prevent the stuff from happening. And so now he seems like a totally different child. So I just wanted to validate that it is so true. And like just the parent that had mentioned before that he called the school ahead of time, I also think that's amazing. It's been a long journey for me, and I was just telling another parent that had a similar thing happen where the setting has changed, and we as parents still are anxious for, like, oh gosh, we're going to get a call and something bad happened, because that was constantly happening. It's good to get also into the whole habit of, well, celebrating all the stuff beforehand, but also thinking ahead too, like, I'm going to make sure that I give him a bag of cereal when he gets to school, or like whatever it is. So like I started thinking differently too because of that, and I just wanted to validate that.
Your contributions, thank you, reminded me of a researcher named Barry Prezant. He's written a couple of books now, but in one of his books, he talks about, he was mostly talking about pediatrics, and he talks about the adults working with pediatrics who are neurodivergent learners to act as detectives. And it took me a while to wrap my brain around that concept, but that ultimately is very frequently how we function. We are the detective looking for the clues about what either caused the behavior or the clues about what could cause the behavior. The other thing is that I was just speaking with somebody, a middle school assistant principal, and I said to her, she was talking to me about, her teachers and her integrated settings, and she's like, all my teachers are doing are complaining. This is, something is not going right. And I said, it sounds to me like there's a mindset shift that needs to happen. And what I mean by that mindset shift is we have so much pressure on these children to change their behavior. I think we're focusing on the wrong group who needs to change, right? The adult needs to change. So sometimes I speak with a parent and they'll say, I just can't get the child to do fill in the blank. Okay, guess what? Maybe we need to figure out a different way to do this, as opposed to just kind of keep going to expect that child's behavior to change. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of a social story. It's something that is written by a woman named Carol Gray. And, you know, in many of her articles and books that she's published, she frequently talks about how a social story, which is this, you know, story that includes some visuals and some language to help offer some perspective for a child or an adult, that the goal of a social story is not to modify behavior. It's simply to offer perspective. She uses other words as well, but for this purpose, we can simplify. So when we're thinking about a child and a behavior, whether it's a positive behavior or a negative behavior, we want to think about, well, okay, maybe down the line, I do kind of want this behavior to get modified and to change a bit. But for right now, is there something I can change in this context? Something I could change that I am doing that may ultimately impact this behavior? I also recognize, and I know we're just about out of time, that we have spent a lot of time talking about negative behavior, but we also have to talk about positive behavior, right? There's lots of things that our children do that need to get celebrated. So when we talk about behavior, we need to talk about all those positive things. And we need to do that detective work again. What did I do right before this really good thing just happened? What was happening proactively to support or celebrate? I'm thinking of the example in the front of the room where we talked about this little girl taking her dad's hand towards the cereal cabinet. What did he do in that moment that was positive? He allowed his child to take that hand. If his reaction had been different, you might have been talking about a different part of this behavior curve. So again, I think that detective work that, you know, is really connecting with what you commented is just as an important piece as, you know, even thinking about, okay, yes, we see this challenging behavior. Yes, we see something negative happening, but there's a lot of positive that's happening too. So we need to celebrate that, of course, but we also need to use those detective skills. All right, so we're just about at the hour mark, and we had our 3 pillars, but we talked about 1 tonight, so that's okay. It was such a beautiful conversation to have about behavior. I really, really enjoyed it. I hope that you took just 1 moment away. I do want to just go to the very end of the presentation because I do think this is worthwhile here. There's something that I wanted to just... there was lots of stuff in here. Oh, goodness gracious. Okay. I wanted to just give you a moment to reflect on tonight because there's a couple of things I enjoy learning about mindfulness. And when we think about mindful teaching, we think about reflection after new material or material that possibly is a little different is being offered to you. So I'd like for you just to take a pause and think about what we discussed this evening and think about what you had a strong connection with, what you had a neutral connection with, and what you had a little bit of connection with. That strong connection could be something as simple as, I made a new friend during the Zombie Cats game, and it was awesome. Or it can be deeper and say, I really want to go home and think about fill in the blank. So I'll give you about a minute or so just to kind of conclude. Some people enjoy writing this down, by the way, as a mindfulness practice. Some people put it as like a Post-it in their phone, and others just think about it in their heads. So I'll give you about 1 minute to do that, and then we'll say goodbye. So I'm just going to say goodnight to the viewers who are listening online with us. It was such a pleasure to spend some time with you guys this evening, and I look forward to having continued conversations through your questions that you offer, et cetera. Good night.